as we've been hearing from Fox News, it's going to be the coldest caucus in history in Iowa. The first look at how things will shape up in this presidential election year. Former President Trump still holding a commanding lead going into these caucuses, looking at the latest polling. David Dulio joining us, the director of Center for Civic Engagement and Political Science professor at Oakland University, to talk all things Iowa caucus. Hi, David.
Hi, good morning.
Glad you could join us today. So listening to all the polling, seeing all the polling, reviewing it, is there any chance that Donald Trump won't win this caucus, in your mind?
Well, never say never, but right. No. This is going to be very likely the most lopsided victory in the Iowa caucuses, certainly in recent memory and maybe ever.
Well, yeah, I was listening to some reporting yesterday saying Trump right now, the Des Moines Register, NBC News poll showing him with a 48% lead in this race. Haley coming in at 20%, Ron DeSantis at 16%. That 48%, the highest rate ever for any GOP candidate, ever.
Right, and it just speaks to and is an indicator of the dominance of Donald Trump right now in the Republican race for the nomination.
All right.
It's astounding.
Does it mean anything, though, because we're looking at polling also, does it mean anything to GOP voters that Nikki Haley, when you're looking at polling that shows her going, if she was the nominee against Biden, it shows her beating Biden, but when you put Trump against Biden, it's still within the margin of error. He leads, but it's still within the margin of error. Does that mean anything to GOP voters?
I think it means something to some GOP voters. I think it means nothing to Donald Trump's diehard supporters. They are with him until the end, and I think at some point down the road, if it is at the end of the day a Donald Trump versus Nikki Haley sort of one-on-one battle for the nomination, that you might see some movement in those numbers. But I think that for now it's only a handful of folks where it really makes a difference that Nikki Haley is beating President Biden and Trump less so. Now, if we got to a point where Donald Trump started to appear vulnerable to President Biden, then I think you might see something different. The electability argument has always made a lot of sense, that if some other Republican could come along and say, hey, I'm the one who can beat Biden, Trump can't, that is, then you might see some shifts. But until that happens, and unless that happens, I think we're status quo. Well,
Ron DeSantis early on was saying, look, I'm the one who can take on Joe Biden, but he's shown himself to have problems even taking on Nikki Haley. So, I mean, she's done a very, very good job articulating her position and her messaging. It's just been spot on from the very beginning. And something I found interesting, I was wanting to get your take on this. Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota was on one of the morning news shows yesterday, and he talked about, because, this whole issue of Biden being too old to run. I mean, we're asking those questions of Donald Trump as well. But he said that Biden's competency outweighs age concerns. And I thought to myself, there it is. There's the messaging. We're going to keep hearing more and more about that. As people start to continue to question Biden's abilities, that's what they're going to zero in on.
Oh, I think you're going to hear that and a bunch of other stuff that is aimed at just reinforcing the vulnerability of President Biden from an electoral perspective. I think, in my judgment, Joe Biden is the most vulnerable incumbent president that we've ever seen.
Ever.
And ever. And it's because of things like his age and the doubts that some have about his ability to do the job moving forward, but it's also tied to results and issue positions and performance, right? I think that we're seeing some economic indicators that are positive about the state of the economy, but at the same time, I think voters are still feeling high prices, and from that prolonged stretch of high inflation, prices are still high, and I think that their perception of the economy is very different than what some of the economists are reporting.
Let's talk a little bit more about the Iowa caucuses. People are saying that weather is going, a couple things at work here. Weather is, I mean, we have to talk about it. It's a real factor in Iowa. And number two, is it possible that so many people who maybe were Trump supporters are going to say, oh, you know what, he's got this in the bag, I'm just staying home. You know, we always have that issue even in elections. Do you think those two things will be a factor tonight?
Well, I think weather is absolutely a factor, and I mean, we see over time that voter turnout is impacted by rainy days, right? If it rains, turnout goes down.
Yeah.
Let alone if it's a minus 40 wind chill factor, right? I mean, I think that you'll absolutely see lower turnout than projected, and let's be honest about it. The turnout in these Iowa caucuses is not very high to begin with, right? Even on the best days, it's pretty low. If anybody is going to turn out, I think it's Trump supporters. I think they are so rabidly behind him that they would turn out and show their support for him in just about any kind of conditions. I think it's the folks that are more on the fence. They're the ones that are more likely to stay home.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Guy Gordon this morning made the point that, here we are, Iowa caucuses, talking all about this when in fact, the Iowa caucuses really do not represent anything average about America. This is not representative of the electorate in this country. In fact, Michigan is more common or more like the general electorate here in this country. Would you agree with that?
Oh, without a doubt. Part of it's because of the caucus system that is used in Iowa. Part of it's demographics that are statewide, but without a doubt. And folks need to remember that this is a long process, right?
Yes.
It's contest after contest after contest. But the Iowa caucuses do have they sort of punch above their weight in terms of impact. We're even hearing now some reports that if Ron DeSantis doesn't finish second, he's going to drop out tomorrow. Well, that's the kind of effect that Iowa has and has had over the years, that for some reason folks think if they have one poor performance, that it's over. And that's not necessarily the case, although it maybe more than likely is this time around, but that's not always the case, and yet it still has this huge impact on who is eventually going to be the nominee when, as you say, it's not at all representative of the country.
Absolutely. Always love talking with you, David Dulio, Director of the Center for Civic Engagement, Political Science, and a professor at Oakland University. Always such clear insights to share with our listeners. We appreciate it, and I know you'll be watching tonight.
Yep, thanks for having me. Stay warm out there.
Yeah, we will on this Martin Luther King holiday. We'll continue here on WJR. We're going to wrap up the show talking about Detroit Lions superfan. We've got one on the line. He'll be joining us next.